Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyck. Call me Helen if you'd like. Everyone does. Today I'm going to show you how different it is to have a brush in your hand in relation to having a pencil. You're all accustomed to a pencil, it makes a line. A brush doesn't do that. A brush does three distinct things. Before I paint this lovely Dutch vase, coffee pot, let me show you the three functions of a brush. I'll do it right up here in this corner, since I know that I'm not going to be using that where the pot is. The first thing that a brush does, and it's the easier function, it fills in large areas. Since I'm going to be using a brown background to paint my picture today, why don't I put a brown little spot here and fill it in adequately. Don't do this. Notice how that doesn't cover well. No stroke any longer than 1.5 inches makes it much more adequate coverage than big wide swashes across the canvas. The next thing a brush can do is to bump a tone, a contrasting tone, against that area sharply, like that. Or you might want to put a tone against that in a fuzzy way. Maybe you can notice that this looks as though it's rolling back, and this looks as though it might jump forward. After all, this is almost a trickery to paint a three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional surface, because one of the realistic things about my still life is that it has the depth dimension, and I'm going to try to get that on this flat surface. So you can see how different it is to have a brush in your hand and not a pencil. You worry about drawing, I can't draw a straight line. Well, if you want to, use a ruler. But a brush doesn't make a line. If you put a brush here, I really have two lines, one on this side and one on that side. Well, let's see what happens now in handling a brush instead of a pencil and painting a picture rather than doing a drawing. Actually, painting a picture of a house is more like building it than drawing it. We have to actually recreate it with paint. And so the first thing I'm going to do is to plot it out, find out where I want the foundation, which is going to be the pot. After that, I'm going to put in some structures to see where I'll put, let's say, my siding. The show is going to start to sound like This Old House instead of Welcome to My Studio. But let's see. Let me start. I'm dying to get going. I'm sure you're dying to see what's going to happen. Let's plot this out first. I don't want any of the flowers to get any lower than this. And I don't want the handle of the pot to go out of the picture either. And so this helps me deal with the lot that I have, and this is the house, about that big. Let's call this the shrubbery. All right? And one of the things that we always should take into consideration in painting a shape is to understand its anatomy or its structure, and the structure of that is very simple. It's a cylinder, and so there's a straight line that will help me get it even on both sides. Painting is a very positive thing to do. Don't worry about what you're doing. If you do, you're going to get, well, nervous. But you have to do it to see how it looks. You can't predict it. So do it and see how it looks. And if it doesn't look right, you can, even with paint, have an eraser in your hand, and that's a little rag soaked with turpentine, and that's how I can clean that off. So this is really, in painting, the drawing stage. It's not so much drawing as finding out where the painting process is going to park itself. Okay, now, there's a saying, a wonderful saying, start with a broom and finish with a needle. and it is the saying that suggests the procedure you'll use to paint. You do all the big things first, and then gradually come down to the finer details. So let me start out with the most practical place to start. Let me start out with the most practical place to start. Wouldn't you say it's the background? All right, so I'm going to use the brown color. It looks Holland to me. Or let's say this brownish color is going to accent the blue pattern. And here's those strokes, no longer than 1.5 inches. And I have my mind only on the background, not on the pot. Can't do two things at once, can't think of two things at once. Just a nice coverage. Oops, too light, too much white in it. And so this covers well. And be more aware of the way your picture's going to look than the way that looks. You're almost victimizing that for the sake of this, because well, this is what I'm working on. So even though I don't see it, I'm going to darken the background over on the edges. And this will help focus the viewer's attention to this pot or this house on its lot. If you're a beginner or haven't even painted, don't try to do something that's too profound in the beginning. Pick a simple subject. That is really a simple subject. It's not complicated in color. It's light in contrast to its background. And you'll have a chance to learn how to push one tone against another. And so I've taken some black and white and some yellow. Never use black and white alone. It's too boring a color. I have a maul stick in my hand that helps me steady my hand as I go to be able to get these edges. Now see that? Oh, I think I'll put that little top knot on just to suggest it. Not its exact shape at this time. Remember, I said start with a broom and finish with a needle. With a smaller brush, later on, I might be able to make the peculiarity of that little knob. And I'm just bumping this lighter tone that represents the pot against the background. It's better to start in the middle with a brush and come out to the line than to start with the line, because you're bumping and trying to make an edge. And the fatter I make it, the thinner I'll get. Everything is relative. And so I like that shape. Yes, these little handles, they'll go on later. And the spigot, I'll think about that later too. Try to make it as easy as possible. Don't do it. No one cares how much you suffer. So think in terms of the capacity of the paint, what it can do. Well, what can I do to try to turn paint into being little daisies? I think the first thing to do is just to put in a shape to represent each one. Not a shape, a placement. I'm sorry. And the greenery, just a suggestion at first. I know that beginners always worry about making mistakes. Don't. A mistake is a funny looking place. It's a place that looks different than the rest of it. So you're going to paint and give a certain look to your picture. And that look is going to be the same throughout. And so everything's going to look the same. Your way. And your way is all right. My philosophy, if you do it all wrong, it's all right. Because no one can find the funny looking place. We look at the paintings by Van Gogh, and we certainly see the characteristic of the way Van Gogh painted, and we accept it because it's Van Goghish throughout. And then we look at Rembrandt's too, and recognize his overall flavor. So it's a good thing that there's no such thing as perfect in painting. You just make it look as best you can. And one way to be able to do it is to realize what the brush can do. If I had drawn this all in very, very carefully, I would have had to laboriously fill it in. And maybe I wouldn't get this mysterious depth dimension that seems to be happening. And the depth dimension is, after all, the realistic look. I'm going to slip a darker tone back here to suggest a cast shadow. This pot standing in the way of the light shining on the background. And I like that. Cast shadows make things take up space and have weight. The fatter you are, the bigger your cast shadow. Now, this represents stage one. I have taken a big brush, I've laid in all the big areas, and I've bumped the two together, and it's almost a natural time for me to stop a minute and see what I've done from a distance, because up here it looks fine. From back here, I might be able to recognize some little things I might want to fix. Well, I'm back, and I'm ready for the next step. You probably wonder what this is. It's a mahl stick. And I'm going to be using it more in this stage than I did before. And it's a prop. I put it on the edge of my easel or my picture to steady my hand. And I need a steadier hand because I'm going to be doing more careful things. So why don't I do that right away? Why don't I, with this smaller brush, pretty much the same color, make the shape of that little top knot. And then also add the handles. Why don't I line them up, make them a matching pair? And the spigot. I have the basic structure in. Listen to your picture. Of course I'm making the spigot the size I think it looks on this size pot. There is something about drawing with a pencil and drawing with a brush that is the same. You have to take into consideration proportion, how big you make one thing in relation to another. If I don't get the spout the right size in relation to this, someone will say it looks funny or the drawing is wrong. So you can draw well if you can proportion well. Now I'd like to further develop that pot. And I'll do so by lightening it. I took a sneaky way. I started it kind of dull so that I could not make that bold a statement. And these additional lighter redos puts it more in focus, gives it more dimension. Don't worry. If you're going to worry about something, don't worry about the color. Worry more about the tone. That's why I thought that it would be a good idea to show you how to do just an off-white thing to start out with, because it is the easier color to deal with. Just have to take white and put a little off in it. At another time, I'll talk about how wonderful it is to really record a very white thing. White is a fascinating color. Why don't I take a smaller brush and try to make these blobs more daisy-like. And I'll start with the one in the back first. Always thinking of the depth dimension from back to front. And so I see a little light on that petal, a little light on this petal. Load the brush each time and try to say, brush stroke be a petal. Have enough brushes on hand. Don't try to make one brush a jack of all trades. Even carpenters have many tools, a ripping saw for big jobs. And now I'm going to do this one. Well, when I do this one, I have to realize how nice I'm going to make it in relation to this. And I'm going to talk about something that's very important. I will always ever completely overlap subjects or move them away. So I'm not going to let this petal, right, this petal I see here, touch that one, because then it looks like one big long petal. So I'm going to make sure that this one, this flower, is disconnected completely from that one. Such an important factor of drawing and painting. I have a name for that when you make them just touch. I call them kisses. And you can't kiss on canvas. It confuses the drawing, makes you not read the shapes right. Now before I do this one, I really should finish this bottom of the pot. Let me just suggest this. I'm not doing a painting of daisies. These daisies just supplement the painting of this little teapot or coffee pot. Since I've never used it, I don't know whether it's for coffee or tea. Just a little bit too precious for me to actually use. I'm sure we all have these precious things in our house. Cast shadows onto them, onto those daisies, are very helpful. And now with a soft brush, I'd like to accentuate the shadow that I see here. And here's where I'm going to be moving one tone against the other in a blended way to make it round out. I see a bigger shadow, a darker shadow under the lip of the lid. And I see a little tiny lighter tone to show its base. And so now you can see I've recorded it more plausibly, not realistic. That's real. This isn't. This is a picture of real done with paint and paint's capacities. I'm adding a highlight. Oh, I've got a wonderful lesson for you on how to paint highlights and how important they are. In fact, I have so many things I want to tell you about. I'm liable to tell you all about it in this picture, but I'll save some goodies for later. And I'm, again, at a point that I would like to step back to see how this looks. See it, let's say, from your point of view. I like to check over this basic shape before I show you how to put the blue pattern on. Now, if I were looking for an effect that was not as, well, we call loosely painted, I'd wait for this painting so far, that I've done so far, to dry before I put the blue pattern on. But because it seems casually done, I have to do the blue pattern casually too. So I'm going to take a smaller brush. Yes, you may think I would use something even smaller than this. But this brush can do something very little by the way you hold it in your hand. So I'm going to take the blue and instead of with a pencil we will do this, I'm going to step back and hold it rather lightly so it just kind of feathers over. I'll need the trusty little maul stick to do it though. And I look at things from the top down. Good way not to miss anything. Here and here. These have to be elliptical because they're going around an elliptical pot. Dangerous? Of course. If I goof and have to fix it, I'll end up with a blue pot. That's the intrigue of painting. And also, I don't feel so terribly committed to make the design exactly as it is. At a time when I want to do it more carefully, yes, I would, but this is just an added little pleasure. Ooh, I've got to get that white daisy in yet, because I think it's an important one. It's always nice to have in your pictures subject matters that all overlap or join together to make one overall composition. If you disjoint them, it's not compositionally as unified. There's another thing I have to tell you all about. Composition. And I'm going to have to take a little bit of poetic license to put the handle in. Poetic license. What a fanciful phrase for such a practical thing about painting. Poetic license is to change it because you want it. Very often you have to change it because you have to. I can't make it as tall as I see it. I don't have the room. But who will know when the person looks at this picture? The person doesn't, this little pot's going to be back up on a shelf. And so, that's about it. And next time we meet, I'll teach you how to paint reflections on glass, or maybe I'll just teach you how to make soup. Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyck, and welcome to my studio.